Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's lecture, and we're covering the integumentary system. So let's go ahead and begin. Let's talk about functions. The first function here is protection. Actually, your integumentary system allow you three types of barrier, and mostly when we're talking about integumentary system here, we mean your skin, really. You know what, let's get over here first before we start talking about function. Actually, your integumentary system is made of skin. That's the major organ and the biggest organ of this system, and accessory structures such as hair, glands, and nails, right? So let me pick up my pen, right? So integumentary system is a body system, the same as you have your cardiovascular system or your reproductive system, respiratory, right? So you have integumentary. Now, body systems are made of organs. Now, what are the organs of your integumentary system? Your cutaneous membrane or skin and accessory structures, right? So now let's go back and talk about the functions. And talking about function here, we mostly mean your skin. Now, first, protection. Your skin provides three types of barrier. Chemical barrier first. Skin has a low pH, and because of that, and also proteins called defensins, it allows you to retard bacterial activity. Your skin is also biological barrier. You have dendritic cells and macrophages, that part of your immune system, and they are phagocytic cells. So they can engulf and destroy different pathogens. It's also your physical or mechanical barrier. On your skin, you have keratin. It's a protein. And you have glycolipids. Now, keratin and glycolipids, they block most water, right? So here's the water and water-soluble substances from entering your body, and at the same time from leaving your body, because you don't want to dehydrate if you lose water, right? Physical and mechanical barrier also means, of course, you block water and water-soluble substances, but you also limit penetration of skin by lipid-soluble substances, such as, for example, plant oleoresins like poison ivy, organic solvents, salts, heavy metals, some drugs, right? Another function is body temperature regulation. So you sweat about 500 milliliters per day, that we call insensible perspiration. That means at a normal body temperature. When your temperature is elevated, you have dilation of the dermal vessels. Those are vessels found in your dermis. That's a part of the skin. And then the sweat activity, sweat gland activity increases. That is sensible perspiration, cooling your body. Another function is cutaneous sensation. You have sensory receptors in your skin that allow you to feel temperature, touch, pain, right? And some other sensation like, say, vibration or pressure, right? Another function is metabolic. Including synthesis of precursor of vitamin D and collagenase. Now, collagenase is an enzyme that breaks collagen, and you need to break collagen in a damaged tissue so your body can synthesize healthier, so your body can heal, right? So sometimes you need to break collagen to repair your tissue, to synthesize more. Yeah, how much sense it makes, right? You break collagen to make more collagen. Also, chemical conversion of carcinogens and some hormones. Your skin is also your blood reservoir. Up to 5% of your body blood volume is stored in the blood vessels of your dermis. And the last function over here is excretion. You remove some nitrogenous wastes and salt in sweat. Right. So this slide, we kind of cover it a little bit, right? We said that integumentary system is made of cutaneous membrane or your skin, the biggest organ of integumentary system, and accessory structures such as hair, glands, and nails. So if you look at this block over here, that's a diagram represent your skin, and you can see that it's made of two major parts. So superficial part over here, right? This is called epidermis, right? So here's epidermis on the top, and way thicker part over here, oops, up to this point, not till the very end. This is dermis. Now you also see this area here that is mostly fat. This is called hypodermis, or another name is superficial fascia. And technically it's not part of the skin. However, it shares some functions with dermis. But the skin is made of epidermis and dermis. You also can see that epidermis is a vascular layer. There is no blood vessel, and lots of blood vessels, right? Arteries, small arteries, capillaries, veins, venules in the dermis, right? Also, if you look at the accessory structure here, you can see glands, because here's your accessory structure gland. So here's your oil glands. Here, right there, or right there, sebaceous, it's oil glands, and here's your sweat gland, and this is your hair. That is also, oops, accessory structure. My hair was very wavy right there. Right. Okay. So let's look at the layers of the skin. So we know two parts, epidermis and dermis, and we're gonna look at epidermis first. Now, epidermis is made of stratified squamous keratinized epithelium, right? So stratified means many layers. Squamous means cells are flat on the apical surface, and keratinized means they accumulate lots of keratin, and those cells on the surface right here, right, they are dead cells. So we have 4 or 5 layers, and if we have a thick skin, we will have 5 layers. If we have thin skin, we will have 4 layers. Epidermis is avascular, and major cells are keratinocytes, and those are the ones that synthesize keratin. Now, on this histology slide, all this part over here, this is dermis, and epidermis, this darker part. Well, now why it's so much darker? Because it's more cellular. You have way more cells over here. It's epithelial tissue, and cells are touching each other. We have junctions between cells. So it's very, very cellular structure over here, many cells. And that's why they kind of pick up dye better, and they look darker. And also these lines on the top are actually dead flakes of keratinocytes. So keratinocytes died, and you have lots of keratin on the surface that give you this mechanical and physical barrier. Well, that creates this mechanical and physical barrier. So we just said that we have 4 or 5 layers of epidermis, and this is the name: stratum corneum, stratum lucidum, granulosum, spinosum, and basal. Another name for stratum basal is stratum germinativum. That's a hard name. So basal is fine because it's kind of on the base. There is a mnemonic to remember them in order, and the mnemonic is come, let's get sunburn. Right, so you kind of put the first letters of each word, and it's gonna be CLGSB, come, let's get sunburn. And corneum is most superficial, that's on the top. And of course, basal is a deepest layer. So here's our basal. Sometimes you might even hear basale, so whatever you want to call it. It's actually like 1 or maybe 2 layers of cells only. And you have stem cells over here. So it's a germ layer. Those are cells that are living cells, and they can divide, and they have to divide because they will need to replace the cells that are in the more superficial layers and the ones that are dead. Now, underneath of epidermis, you have dermis. And actually, okay, so if I draw dermis, so I would have it like this, right? And epidermis would be here on the top, right? Now, this kind of little hills over here of the dermis, they are called dermal papilla, right? So that's a dermal papilla, because you kind of don't have your, let's say this is your dermis and this is your epidermis. So it's not like a straight line over here. We have papillae, right? And then we have our epidermis. So it's kind of formed like almost like a Z line, and it's allowed for better connection between epidermis and dermis. So the dermal papilla shown over here, right? So this pink structure, that's a dermis, and particularly it's a dermal papilla. You also have in a stratum basale, of course, those cells, these yellow cells here are called keratinocytes. But look at this blue cell here. This is called Merkel cell or touch receptor. Another cell that can be found, or type of cell that can be found in stratum basal, are melanocytes. So here's our melanocyte shown here a little bit greenish color. And melanocytes, they produce a melanin. Melanin is a pigment that migrates into keratinocytes. So they actually migrates into keratinocytes, and it forms a shield around the nucleus. So it's protect nucleus from the radiation from the sun, right? So pigment shields for nuclei. So again, melanin is produced by melanocytes, but then it migrates into keratinocytes and protects it from radiation, harmful radiation. So you heard about it, UV rays, right? Next layer is, so now we started with deep, right? We started with basal. Now we move up, and it's stratum spinosum. Now cells start dying in the stratum spinosum. They actually form like lots of connection between each other called desmosomes, and they start secrete keratin over here. And when we have accumulation of keratin within cells, start dying. So you see this one, for example, I don't know if the reason why they didn't put nucleus over here, just to show us that maybe some of the cells are already dead cells. But closer you move to the surface, less and less living cells you have in the stratum spinosum, until you get to this, and oh, by the way, you have Langerhans cells, and those are macrophages. So you have macrophages over here in the stratum spinosum. It's a special type of macrophages called Langerhans cells. Now, stratum granulosum. Actually, under microscope, this is the easiest strata to identify because you will see lots of granules inside keratinocytes. That's where name came from, stratum granulosum. And the protein that we have over here, or I would say like organic molecule here, is called keratinohyaline. Keratinohyaline, it's a keratin filaments that are attached to each other. So keratinohyaline, so hyaline is a molecule that binds keratin filaments, and filaments means proteins together. So you can see that stratum granulosum maybe, have like several layers of cells. Stratum spinosum is a little bit thicker. Basale has one layer, or sometimes two layers only. Now we move towards the surface, and we have stratum lucidum. What we want to remember about stratum lucidum, this one only found in a thick skin. And your thick skin is only skin of your palm and soil. Okay. Now, so here, stratum lucidum, pretty thin layer. It has elidin, that is transformation product of keratinohyaline. So those cells, starting with stratum granulosum all the way up, those are now dead cells. And they accumulate first this keratinohyaline, then elidin, and they deposit it outside of the cell. So pretty much those proteins, they kill the cells. And what we have like pretty much cell membrane surrounding the bunch of surrounding bunch of keratin fibers, and it will be some glycolipids in between those dead cells. And the most superficial is stratum corneum, 15 to 30 layers of cells. They filled with keratin, they dead. And you constantly losing some of these cells, so they flake off your skin. And whatever flakes off need to be replaced. So those cells in the stratum basal, they divide. So if you imagine that this cell will divide, right? So cell divides and cells moving up, right? So your older cells are close to the surface and close to the dermis, your newer cells. So it takes about 4 weeks to replace those dead cells. So for example, if this cell is just formed, right, then another cell will be formed and push this cell up. So for this cell to travel from stratum basalar all the way to stratum corneum, and then finally will be, flaked off, or you shed it off of the surface, that would take about 4 weeks. Okay, next. Now we're moving to the dermis. So let's look at this histology slide over here. So from this point up to all this part, this is your epidermis, right? So that's epithelial tissue. Now from here, kind of like light pink, all the way to the end of the slide, this is your dermis. Now you see this pink structures look like nipples. This is our dermal papillae, right? So that's a dermal papilla. That's why the dermis can be divided into papillary layer. So that's our papillary layer right there. So it's a superficial part of dermis, and deep part of the dermis is reticular layer. Now, papillary layer is made of areolar connective tissue, and reticula is made of denser regular connective tissue. So you can see we have our epithelial tissue, and we have connective tissue. Or we have epithelial tissue here, right? And this is connective tissue. On the top, you see stratum corneum, that is completely dead cells filled with keratin. We have some lipids between the cells. But this is the one that you will lose, right? So those are dead cells that you will shed off. So again, this is our areolar connective tissue, dense irregular connective tissue. Major cells over here are fibroblasts. So you see those kind of darker cells here and over there. Those are fibroblasts. You also will have adipocytes that are fat cells. You will have small blood vessels in a papillary layer and bigger blood vessels in the reticular layer. You will have Meissner corpuscles. They're not shown over here, but they would be kind of in this papillae, and those are touch receptors. Now, reticular layer, you will have lots of collagen fibers and elastic fibers. And the cells also gonna be fibroblasts. So fibroblasts here and there. Sorry, I apologize. So let's look at this histology slide now. So we have our epidermis. Here's our dermal papillae, right? We have dermis up to this layer. Deep to dermis, we have hypodermis. Right? So that's our hypodermis, and mostly it would be adipose tissue. So hypodermis has three names. So you can call it hypodermis, superficial fascia, subcutaneous tissue. It's a subcutaneous layer, deep to skin, not technically part of skin, mostly adipose tissue and highly vascularized. But I just want to remind you, vascularized means has lots of blood vessels. Right, so let's look at some marks on your skin. So friction ridges, this is what you call your fingerprints and toe prints. Those are actually epidermal ridges that lie atop of deeper dermal papillary ridges to form friction ridges or fingerprints. So you remember we have our dermal papilla, right? And then epidermis kind of gonna pretty much follow this pattern. So it will reflect those dermal papillae, but now we call it epidermal ridges. And in between, you will have opening of the sweat glands. So those dots over here, those are opening of sweat glands and sweat ducts. And this is what will leave your fingerprint, because your fingerprint will be your sweat and the oil of your skin and a little bit dust of that surface that you're touching. So that's called friction ridges that give you your finger and toe prints. Another mark that would be interesting to mention are cleavage lines. Collagen fibers in the dermis, they arranged in bundles, and those bundles form cleavage line or tension lines. So if you look at this guy over here, you see those cleavage lines kind of have a different pattern if you compare abdomen or your arms or forearms. And it has some significance because incisions made parallel to cleavage line heal more rapidly. So it's as a healthcare professional, especially if you deal with a patient and this patient after surgeries, right? It's good to know. And of course, if you perform surgery, that's good to know that if you cut along these cleavage lines, then incision will heal way better if you compare if you cut across, right? Flexure lines on the hand, it's creases on the palm that allow you to flex your fingers and your carpal in in this area in your palm where you have your carpal bones. Now we already mentioned melanocytes. So what do we want to add? Well, first, melanocytes are found in the stratum basal. So this is our epidermis. And this most deepest layer of epidermis is stratum basal. And this is where we have melanocytes. And melanocytes, they synthesize that melanin. And you can see the melanin is deposited inside keratinocytes. Right? So keratinocytes actually accumulate this melanin, and this is what protects nucleus of those cells from UV radiation. Now, there is two types of melanin. Eumelanin is black or brown pigment, and pheomelanin is red or yellow pigment. So pretty much like we used to think that some people have, I don't know, more melanocytes, less melanocytes, but actually we just think that your skin of your color, and especially like, like sometimes when you get more dark, when you have suntan, so the skin color might depend on which type of melanin is more predominant in your body, right? We all have eumelanin and pheomelanin. Like pheomelanin, for example, you find in the skin of your lips. That gives them like this, pink color. So darkening of skin occurs when melanin accumulates, and it's actually it's secreted out of melanocytes in melanosomes. Now moles are large masses of melanocytes. So like, for example, I have lots of moles. So my melanocytes just like to form those masses instead of be equally distributed through my stratum basal, right? Well, unfortunately, some masses of melanocytes can form melanoma, but most of them are benign. And melanoma is a cancer of melanocytes, very aggressive. Okay, so now we briefly will talk about accessory structure. So I want to go back and just remind you that integumentary system is made of skin or cutaneous membrane and accessory structure that are hair, glands, and nails, right? So let's see what do we want to know about those accessory structure. We're going to start with hair. Function, protection, sensory input, thermoregulation, communication. I don't know, not so much in human, right? But animals might communicate through, using their hair. Like if you have a cat and if they wanna scare some other animals, their hair will stand up. So that's a way of communication, kind of telling, get away from me, telling somebody, right? Get away from me, I'm big and scary. Now hair grows through these three phases that will be, will be covered in the next slide. And hair color also depends on the pigment melanin. Oh, you know what? I forgot to tell you about color of the skin. It's not just melanin, but it's also keratin and hemoglobin, right? Hemoglobin is the pigment found inside your red blood cells, and keratin you get from your diet. So it's also contribute to the skin color. Completely forgot. So a hair color depends on melanin. Now let's look at structure of hair. Now hair grows from hair follicle, and hair follicle is located in your dermis, right? So let's just for a second go back over here, so you can see where this hair follicle is located, right? So you see that's a hair follicle, and you can see it's in the dermis, and the hair is growing from the follicle. You know, I watched some funny video on TikTok, and the girl was saying like, what? Your hair is growing from inside? It's not growing somewhere over here, it's growing from inside of you? Do I have hair in my brain or what? No, you don't have hair in your brain, but you have hair in your dermis, okay? So now we're gonna look at this hair follicle. Now hair follicle is an organ, and hair grows within hair follicle. So if you look from this point up to here, that's a hair follicle, right? So all this structure, you know, like this, right? All the way to this point, that's a hair follicle, right? Or even, I'm sorry, even this one. Yeah, that's a hair follicle. And hair is inside. Now, hair follicle is made of epithelial tissue. So this kind of darker part, this is epithelial hair sheath or root sheath. I just call it hair sheath because it's root sheath. No, you can call it epithelial root sheath or epithelial hair sheath. So that's the epithelial sheet, and this one start somewhere probably let me see where they have one that's the whole thing. So from here to here, this is connective tissue sheath. So we have epithelial sheet and connective tissue sheet, and epithelial root sheet has internal root sheet and external, right? So it's like a lot of tissue. So let's just remember that the follicle is made of epithelial tissue and connective tissue. Now, this white part of the follicle is called hair ball, right? So that would be our hair bulb. Now this like little nipple over here is called hair papilla, and this is connective tissue as well. Kind of on following this hair papilla is a hair matrix, and in a hair matrix we have cells that divide and the cell that produce this keratin. Now this is your hair, right? In the middle we have a hair medulla, right there, medulla over here, and then we have a cortex. So kind of it's hard to see it right there. It's not that distinct, but I would say maybe like a little bit lighter part is the medulla, and that's a cortex surrounding it. Some hair doesn't even have medulla. And then you see this white line over here. This is a hair cuticle. So we have hair cuticle, hair cortex, and hair medulla. Now, the only cells that are living cells are cells of this hair matrix. Everything else are dead cells that are filled with keratin. So that's why you can cut your hair and you don't feel any pain. Now, this is the surface of your skin. Whatever goes above the surface is called hair shaft, and kind of below the surface is the hair root. Okay. Now, we just look at the previous slide, and it said that right there. Oh no, over here. Hair grows through 3 phases: anagen, catagen, and telogen. So here we have those phases. So anagen is active growth phase, and it takes 3 to 6 years for hair to grow. Now, some people, obviously, their anagen is only 3 years. For some people, it's 6 years. For me, I don't know, it seems like 2 years for me. I'm just kidding. But no more than 3 years, because my hair doesn't really grow very long. So when some people, you would wonder why some people can grow very long hair and some don't. So this might be one reason why, because anagen phase is shorter. So, you know, you can imagine if it's only 3 years, that hair will not grow that long. Now, if you want to remove your hair, if you want to remove permanent hair, this is the only stage that can be used. So only hair in anagen can be removed. So 90% of hair are in this phase. 10% of the hair are in telogen, and telogen is resting phase. Then, you know, pretty much hair is not growing anymore. It rests for 5-6 weeks, and then it just, you loses it, right? But let's get to catagen. So anagen is growth phase, catagen is transition phase. And what happened, so this is dermal papilla. And in the dermal papilla, you have blood vessels that bring nutrients to the matrix. Remember, there is a matrix over here. Those are living cells, so they need oxygen, nutrients, so they can divide, right? And they divide, so the hair getting longer, but the cells that they form, then those cells die, accumulate collagen again. But in catagen, this papilla, actually, it's let's see, 1 second. Separates itself. Yeah, I was looking for this word, separate. So papilla and the matrix, they are separated. And this hair, club here, what we call it, start moving towards the surface. And finally, there is complete separation between papilla and matrix. And then hair just cannot grow any longer, right? So as I said, telogen, it will rest for 5-6 weeks, and then you will lose this hair, and you will start anagen again, right? And so here's your cycle: 3-6 years growth phase, 1-2 weeks transition phase, 5-6 weeks resting phase. But you know, you still have the follicle, right? So you still have hair follicle here, and you have and you still have your papilla. Just let's go back over here. So you would still have this follicle, right? So you would still have this papilla, and you would have still this follicle, and then you know, your hair papilla moves towards the follicle, attaches itself to the follicle, and you start your anagen again. Alopecia is hair thinning in both sexes after age 40, and true or frank baldness is when, you know, we have genetic predestination to be bald, pretty much, some of us, right? And it can be with males and females. Just male pattern is also caused by testosterone. So it's a genetic, so it's genetically determined, but it's also sex influenced. So because both kind of males and females can be true bald, we still see more males that are losing their hair. Well, first of all, because this is sex-linked gene, so carried by mothers and expressed more in boys, and plus testosterone plays a role in a male pattern baldness, right? In male pattern baldness, I think it's just like on the top of the head, right? Mostly, you're getting bald from the top. Nails are also accessory structures, function protection, and help us to pick up small objects. So nails, the same as your hair, are made of keratin. It just might be a little bit more durable keratin over here. But if you look at structure, it's not that different. So you have nail root, and this is where you will have a matrix as well. Nail matrix, where you have cells that divide, that synthesizes keratin, and then keratin are deposited on the top of your fingers and toes. And this part that you can see called nail body, right? And this is called the nail bed. Now we have a proximal nail fold, right? And what else? Yeah, this is the bone, by the way. Now, if you look here, this white part is called lunula. This fold of skin is called epinuchium, and this one hyponuchium or hyponuchium. Hyponuchium and epinuchium or hyponuchium and epinuchium, and this is a fold of the skin, right, that holds your nail in place. So we have lateral fold, we have proximal fold, and lunula, and free edge, the ones that you trim a little bit if you choose to do so. Another accessory organs are sweat glands. We have two types of sweat glands, eccrine or merocrine and apocrine. So if you look on this diagram, you can see one sweat gland has a duct that deposits sweat on the surface of your skin, and another gland actually has duct that associated with hair follicle, and you kind of release your sweat around your hair. Now this is apocrine gland. So hair follicles in axillary and genital region. So apocrine glands, this is the ones that give you body odor, and they produce water secretion made of water, salt, and organic compounds. And please review apocrine type of secretion from our previous lectures. Now, eccrine is hypertonic sweat and used in thermoregulation. So those glands do not give you body odor, and secretion is made of water, salt, antibodies, metabolic waste, and antimicrobial peptides. So eccrine, most common, they widely spread through your body, and they release sweat through the duct and sweat pore, and apocrine through the duct and through the hair follicle. You also have sebaceous glands that are oil glands. They secrete sebum. And sebum is used for lubrication. It has antibacterial properties and help your skin to retain water. And sebaceous gland, right here, you can see them, they associated with the hair follicles. All right, so on histology slide, here our sebaceous gland, right there and right there. And this is hair. Oops, this kind of yellow structure that growing inside hair follicle. We also mentioned that your skin has sensory function. So what are those sensory receptors? We have Meissner corpuscles. So here you can see it finally. So here's the Meissner corpuscle right there, or tactile receptor. So that's give you a sensation of fine touch. Pacinial corpuscles found deep in the dermis, so somewhere right there. And those are for vibration. You also have Merkel cells. Remember in the stratum basal, so that's also for touch. And sensory nerves like that innervate hair follicle, and they bring information about pain and temperature. Thermoregulation is also function of your skin. Now, how exactly it works? So if you look here, so that's the surface of your skin, right, where you have air or water, and that's your epidermis, that is the avascular, this is your dermis. Now in the dermis, you have blood vessels and then smaller capillaries, so those are capillaries. And, you know, you have blood inside your capillaries. Now, when you under stress, you have a part of your nervous system called sympathetic nervous system. This is your fight or flight response. So this part of your nervous system monitors your body temperature and it initiates the response. So if you hot, right, then more blood flow inside those capillaries of your dermis. So the capillaries dilate. Capillaries dilate, allow more blood flow. You have more blood flow, your blood is pretty warm, so you will lose this heat. You will radiate the heat across epidermis, so you get rid of extra heat, right? So that's one way. Another way, you will increase production of sweat. Remember, we just said you produce about 500 milliliters of insensible perspiration. When you need to increase perspiration, you can produce 0.7, 1.5 liters per hour when your sweat glands are active. And sweat glands are also activated by sympathetic nervous system, right? So either you need to produce more or less sweat. And arterial dilation and arterial constriction is relative to what I just said you before. So when you dilate those arterioles, did I say capillaries? I apologize. You cannot really dilate capillaries that much because they don't have smooth muscle. You can dilate arterioles because they do have smooth muscles. So when you dilate arterioles, you have more blood supply and you release heat. And another function of your skin is metabolic function, including vitamin D synthesis. And you need actually UV radiation to help you with vitamin D synthesis. So first, why do you need this vitamin D? Because it's essential for absorption of calcium and phosphorus. So you can eat lots of calcium, but if you do not have vitamin D, you cannot absorb this calcium to your blood. So it will stay in your GI tract and pretty much will be removed with the food residues. But to move calcium from your food, from your GI tract to your blood, you need vitamin D. Now, how you synthesize it? So here's your skin, right? And in your skin, you synthesize pre-vitamin D. It's called cholecalciferol. right? So cholecalciferol is not active form of vitamin D. You also get vitamin D supplements right from your diet. Now, this inactive form of vitamin D converted by your liver to calcidiol first, and then by your kidneys to calcitriol. And what it does, it actually adds another OH group. So you see this OH1, this is OH2, but this calcitriol equals biologically active form of vitamin D. So you need UV radiation, or you need sun. You need to be out in the sun, not too much, right? But still you need the sunlight to activate this pre-vitamin D cholecalciferol, so your liver. So for example, let's say if you don't have enough from your diet or supplement, then your skin can synthesize cholecalciferol, your liver convert it in calcidiol, and kidney into calcitriol. And calcidiol, it's interesting to know that this vitamin D metabolite is present in the blood serum, and its concentration is measured to determine the vitamin D status. So when they measure amount of vitamin D, they actually measure amount of calcidiol that will be converted further by kidney into active form of vitamin D, right? Okay. So next part of this PowerPoint are homeostatic imbalances that I will cover in my next lecture, because I don't really want it to be too long. I believe it's long enough, right? Well, you tell me. But anyways, that's it for this lecture. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope it was helpful.